on the voice of Indiana County, WCCS 101.1 FM, AM 1160. Glad you could join us here on Indiana in the Morning. Time now for our interview segments presented by Marcus & Mack, a law firm representing injured people. And this segment is being live streamed on our Facebook page. So you will see from left to right, Dave Janusek and Denise Jennings-Doyle. And they are here representing today Blairsville's Historical Society. And the Blairsville Underground Railroad, I should say. Pardon me on that one. I noticed that leer that she gave me. So
better you than me.
But at least I was in the ballpark. It does deal with a significant part of Blairsville's history, the Underground Railroad.
That's true. Yes. So as part of our annual Knotweed on August 13th, we present annually our History at High Noon tour. So that is a walking tour, a guided walking tour throughout a designated area of Blairsville. And along the way, you meet former residents, shall we say.
Okay.
And these individuals will be telling his or her stories. And some of them are directly related to the Underground Railroad, and others are just interesting stories from people who once resided in the homes in front of which they're standing.
Okay, so this is not just the Underground Railroad history. It is the history of Blairsville.
Absolutely.
All right. Dave, talk about what you get to do. Are you going to be on the trail yourself?
I will be. I will be playing the part of George Wilkinson.
Okay.
Whom I've interpreted before, having a spirited discussion with an old friend of George's, cabinet maker, Chester Davis.
And Undertaker.
Undertaker, cabinet maker.
Those two kind of go hand in hand. They deal.
You just don't want to mix them up.
Right.
The longer kind of cabinets.
Yes, that's what I was thinking of. I'm glad you said it, not me. But Denise, are you going to be on trail as well?
I will be a guide.
Okay, so all right.
Yes. So I have researched, written, and scripted our interactions, and we have 7. Mm-hmm. And our route this year is part of Market Street, and then down North Walnut Street, and back the other side. So it should be very interesting.
Now, this is something that the Underground Railroad people have done before, right?
Yes. This is our annual event. We've been doing it for, probably at this point, 10 years maybe. And we do it as part of the Knotweed Festival. In the past, during the was it
Diamond Days?
Diamond Days.
I'm old enough to remember that.
Yes. We had done the reenactment of the rescue of Richard Newman.
Right, yes.
And then Diamond Days went on a hiatus, and so we switched gears and partnered again with the Knotweed Festival.
So, David, taking on this part once again, what's your favorite part about portraying a person out of the past?
I'll tell you what's really interesting about it, Josh, is, when we do this tour, we do the cemetery tour, you'll see a large group. Usually they're a large group in no company. You'll see a lot of youngsters in the group. And it's interesting because you're telling history. And you think that the youngsters are kind of, being drugged by the ear, but it's really interesting because they're not. There's really an interest in some of the younger generation as to the history. Some of my favorite part is kind of seeing when the young kids come up, and really the interest, they're not looking around, they're not on their devices, they're literally, and many times it's interesting, you'll get a few youngsters or even some oldsters that want to reenact or become part of the reenactment. Mm-hmm. So it's that interesting kind of, you got to ad-lib a little bit, and you got to kind of stay in character, but nonetheless stay to the history, but kind of imbibe some of the visitors, which is kind of a neat interaction.
There's a flexibility,
Yeah.
And that's what makes it fun when you can, interpret these characters, but also go a little off script, talk to the people, and it is a lot of fun. But David over the years has done a lot of really interesting characters, from an attorney who had perished in the 1889 Johnstown flood.
Ooh.
Yes, to a cigar maker in downtown Homestead. You've done a man who was tried for cowardice, who had been part of Custer's Last Stand.
Wow.
So it's really interesting. Our regions, our counties, our towns, ties to some of these larger stories in history. So we make sure that we want to preserve them in addition to the stories of the Underground Railroad, which is, of course, our number one goal. And but yet I can tell you from going into the schools, going into the civic groups, doing all kinds of presentations, and then hosting visitors. There are people who are just amazed that these histories have unfolded on our streets, whether they're on the streets of Blairsville or Cherry Tree or Indiana. They walk the paths of history every day, and it's so fascinating.
How much preparation goes into creating the tour itself? Because I would assume that because there are so many stories and you want to keep it fresh, you've got to have a new path or a new set of stories each year.
Well, that's true. Now, we do bring some back, but we add, we refresh them. Mm-hmm. For instance, we have interpreted this duo of Chester Davis, the mayor, and George Wilkinson, the constable, in the past, but we tell a little bit more of their stories. Mm-hmm. We have Miss Katie Coleman, and we've told part of her story because she was an Underground Railroad conductor, but this time we're telling a different story, an earlier story of her life. So there is an abundance of time and research that goes into identifying an interesting, relatable character, and then writing the interaction in a fun and interesting way, whether it is compelling and creates an emotional response, or it's funny,
Mm-hmm.
something that's very engaging.
Now, going from the writer's side to the performer's side, do you find yourself going deeper into the character research than what's presented on the page?
I think you have to, Josh. I thought you were going to ask you what my preparation was, because sometimes it's 10 minutes.
Well, that was the next question. But obviously, prep and what I'm talking about in this case is, of course, research into the character, not just the routine.
And it is, right. And I think it's interesting, as Denise had spoken, when you get to know these characters, you get to realize that what this interaction is really about and how they would have reenacted or how they would have interacted. Kind of say, so it's that you get into the history, you get into what's on the surface, the parts that Denise writes, but then you start to ask, like, even last night we were rehearsing and, kind of thought, let's add a different prop. Do you think this is maybe how, if Chester Davis was kind of a little rough and tumble, what can we do to make him a little bit more rough and tumble? And This is just from, I think, that's just interesting. When you said you've been doing it for 10 years, I think I've done it for 8.
Yeah.
So you start to think and it's interesting because, there is some studying to the characters, and I'll start to read a part that I think's new, and I'm like, wait a second. I think I know this story because I may have done it before. And you're like, wait a second. Like, and I always say it's interesting because what is there, 6, 7 maybe?
What?
Tours that go through?
Each individual tour,
Yeah.
I think we should have 4
or 5
this year
5, yeah.
with 7 interactions.
7, right. And I often say, take all 4 tours because depending on which lines I forget, it could be a different story by the end.
Time.
But it could be, it was a different story. But it's a lot of fun. But it is, you do get that history, which is, history is fascinating. And I think that many times when we're young, we don't realize that until we get older. And then you realize, like, this happened right here in Blairsville, in Indiana County. And many of these events weren't just regional. They had national implications. They had, really things that when you look back and think, this happened right here. So it's a fascinating interactions.
We're talking with Denise Jennings-Doyle and Dave Janusek, who are with the Blairsville Underground Railroad Group, and they are presenting History at High Noon during the Knotweed Festival. So let's get the particulars, since we haven't gotten to those yet. We've been talking about the creation of it. So you said there's going to be 4 tours offered?
Yes, correct. So each tour will contain about 15 people.
Okay.
And it begins in West Market Street, which is where our festival booth is.
Okay.
At the Knotweed Festival. So it would begin there. And then each tour leaves approximately 8 to 10 minutes after the previous tour. The tour tickets are $15 a piece. I'm sorry, oh my gosh, 15? No, $5 a piece.
I think it would have been worth 15.
Inflation? No,
15 for
only
you, Josh.
$5.
5 for
No,
everyone.
no.
And
Josh
they're
ticket.
Yeah, they're currently available for purchase online on our Facebook page, Blairsville UGRR, or our website, which is rather long, Underground Railroad Blairsville,
Okay.
or they are available for purchase at our museum on 214 Southeast Lane, Blairsville, during our regular business hours, which are Monday evenings from 5 to 8, Wednesday evenings from 5 to 8, and Saturday mornings from 9 a.m. to noon.
Now, will there be the opportunity to, if there are still spaces available, will there be an opportunity to purchase tickets on the day of the festival?
It's not guaranteed, but if there are tickets left, yes.
So-
We always encourage getting them early.
Right. So, but it doesn't hurt to ask either.
Does not hurt to ask. And you can always call us or email us with any questions. And that's, I'm trying to think what our email address is, blairsvilleUGRR@yahoo.com.
And that's also a place where people can send a message to. Maybe they want to volunteer with the Blairsville Underground Railroad.
Correct. And who wouldn't? As I recall, Josh Woodison did a little bit of volunteering for us in the past.
Yes, I did a little bit. I did record something that is going to be part of a future exhibit.
That is correct.
At the Underground Railroad headquarters. So
yes.
I look forward to seeing that and all the others, but we'll get to that, I think, another time.
Exactly.
Because we're just about out of time.
All right.
But thank you both, Dave and Denise, for joining us this morning on Indiana in the Morning. All the best. Break a leg, Dave. And thank you very much again for joining us.
All right. Thank you, Josh.
Thanks again to Denise Jennings-Doyle, Dave Janusek, joining us from the Blairsville Underground Railroad, joining us this morning on Indiana in the Morning, presented by First Commonwealth Bank. Our interview presented by Marcus & Mack, a law firm representing injured people.